And welcome back. Previously we had left off with our character being able to have this kind of nice running animation that we were able to work with. However, the next thing that we want this character to be able to do is to be able to have a sort of jump animation. And this is a relatively simple animation that we're going to have because there's really only about 2 frames of animation that we need to work with. Now I'm just going to go ahead and make a copy of this. So I'm going to go File, Save a Copy here. And I'm just going to rename this to character-jump. And why I'm doing that is because I want to keep this original sprite layer that I have here. So I'm just going to take these other layers here and hide them real quick and just bring back up my original sprite layer here, just so we can see that. And let me go ahead and open up that copy I just made. So here's my character jump. Go back here. I'm actually going to make sure I didn't change that on that running animation here. I'll make sure he's still good. That looks great there. Oh, except for I have the sprite layer on one of those layers. There we go. Want to make sure he's still running. So on my character jump here, we're actually going to take our running layers here and we're just going to go ahead and delete those out. And let's go ahead and clean up our timeline a little bit here because again, right now we're not yet at the point of animating, which is fine. So I'm just going to start with just 1 frame animation here. I'm going to bring back my original sprite by just toggling that on. And when I'm thinking about how I want this character to jump, pretty much I'm going to have 2 things happening here. I'm going to have the character effectively moving in a downward direction, and at the same time he's moving down, then in the second frame he's going to be springing back up, right? So the first thing we want to do is think about that first movement. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this layer here, just so we have a copy of it. I'm going to just call this jump 1. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my marquee selection tool here. I'm going to go ahead and grab his arm. And because he's going to be kind of bending down with this, his arm is probably going to be kind of almost bending. And think about when you jump and you might actually spring your arms here just a little bit. So I'm going to hide the original sprite layer. And with this selection here that I now have, I can now go ahead and grab my move tool. And I can move that arm inward just a little bit. And that's a good start here. I could, of course, angle that in a little bit more, but I want that arm to be angled in here, so because he's going to be doing that. And then we're also going to do the same thing. Grab my marquee selection tool again. And I'm going to go grab the other arm, including the torch here. And I want to, again, use my move tool to go ahead and bring that down 1 pixel. Because, again, we're trying to show that there's some movement going on here. Now, because this arm that we had here is technically crossing over the plane, we're going to actually just add a few pixels in here. So let's go ahead and grab our eyedropper tool to grab that color of our hand. And I'm just going to paint in just a couple more pixels here. Again, just to show that his arm is crossing over this boundary here. All right. And you can play around with it, get however you want to look to get that final look. Now the other thing we want is that because he's going to be starting in kind of a squat position here, I'm going to go ahead and select the upper half of his body here. So I'm going to go probably to about just the top of the shorts here. And again, using the move tool, I'm just going to go ahead and use my arrow keys to press him down just a little bit because I want him to squat. All right, I want him not to go too far, so maybe just 1 pixel is just enough. And of course, that's going to affect how our legs are. So let's go ahead and deselect this. And all I'm going to do to get started here, I could, of course, just take these legs and try to angle them a little bit, or I can repaint how these legs are coming in here. So effectively right now, it doesn't quite look right because if we think about it, we want this to be almost at a bit of an angle coming in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this zone here, use my move tool, and let's go ahead and actually bring that leg up. And we'll do the same thing here with the other leg. We're going to bring that up. And reason why we're doing this is because when we use our pencil tool, we effectively want to paint this so he's coming out at an angle like this, and then it's coming back into his feet here. So I'm actually going to again paint that through with this color right now and make sure that I have that pattern established. Then we'll switch to my eraser tool and kind of erase out the back of his legs here just a little bit, just so I can kind of get some of that pattern established here. Switch to my highlight color. Let's go ahead and paint in the front of the legs here just a little bit. If we decide, oh, that looks a little too much, of course we can always paint back. It's very easy for us to go ahead and do that. And again, do the same thing over here, because again, we want to show that he's kind of doing a squat down. And we actually might say these feet here are maybe a little too forward. So of course we can adjust the feet a little bit here. We can actually just, again, same thing as what we did before. Grab our selection tool, and I'm actually going to just move those back a pixel. All right. And then again, using our different tools, our brush tool and our eraser tool, we can go ahead and paint these different zones in here to really kind of get a final product that we might be satisfied with. Looks like I might have made this one go back just a little too far, so I'm just going to go ahead and nudge that one back over 1 pixel. All right. And whatever you end up doing, yours might look just a little bit different. That's perfectly fine. Whatever your final product is will, of course, be affected by how your character looks. So I'm just going to try to match these 2 boots here real quick. All right, so now we have those knees in a kind of a squatting position here. Now, we did notice that his head is, of course, still fully extended here. And we're actually just going to take and grab that head area and move that down 1 pixel to kind of show that he's also kind of contracting his neck here as he gets ready to jump. All right, and again, you can play around with this to try and get the pose that you want. But this right here, I think, is a pretty good start for us to go ahead and get started with our first pose. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and take this animation that we have here, and let's go ahead and make a another layer here now to get ready to do the extension where he's going to be jumping up into the air. So to make that new layer, let's go ahead first and duplicate our sprite layer again, and I'm going to call this jump 2. And let's go ahead and just put that above jump 1. I'm going to hide jump 1 to go to jump 2. And the first thing we want to do is when he's jumping up, we want to, for example, have his feet kind of be up in the air. So I'm actually going to take my whole character right now, go ahead and select him. And because we're treating this where his feet are as the ground layer, or the floor, if you will, and we're just going to go ahead and use our move tool to go ahead and bump him up 1 or 2 pixels. Let's go ahead and just go up maybe 2 pixels here so his head's right along the top of that frame there. And let's go ahead and deselect this. And then the next thing we want to do is pretty much take these feet and have them be pointing down because, again, he's in the air. So the easiest way to do this is grab our eyedropper tool and kind of just paint through this area so that his feet are more pointing down. And then use your eraser tool to kind of take those backs off there. And you can, again, play around with this to kind of find the right match of what you want this to look like. All right, and now that that is set up, we're going to focus down on the upper body here. And the trick here with the upper body is that you want to first off take this arm, and we're just going to go ahead and select it. And we're going to go ahead and use our old transformation options under Edit. And let's go ahead and flip that vertical. So his arm is now facing up. Using our move tool, we're going to go ahead and just slide that arm upward so his arm is in the air. Now, when we do the torch, we might have something similar here, but of course you notice the torch is going to be kind of bumping really close to the ceiling here. So it is something to kind of keep in mind here as you get ready to move that piece. So I'm going to go ahead and start by selecting the arm and being careful to keep in mind how this torch is going to be. Because if I go ahead and flip this, so if I do edit, transform, and I flip it vertical like I did before, you can see we get not quite the right shape that we might want. Because we actually just want the arm to be coming up just a little bit. So we're actually going to use our Control T to get our transformation options here. And I'm just going to rotate that arm up just a little bit here until I can kind of get the right area that I want. Now you notice it doesn't quite blend the way we want it to. And that's because we have this torch area here. So I'm actually going to use my eraser tool real quick and go ahead and just erase that torch out of there just temporarily so I don't have to worry about it. And again, using my selection tool, now when I go ahead to select that arm and do the transformation options, as I start rotating that arm, even though we still kind of have a little bit of a mess to work with, it's going to be a little bit easier simply because now I'm not having to deal with the torch in there as well. And I'm going to use this kind of as my base here. Go ahead and hit check. And then I'm just going to use my eraser tool to kind of clean this up just a little bit here so it gets back to more of an arm shape. And when I get to something that I think is satisfying, that looks pretty good there, I'm going to switch to my move tool, deselect this, grab my move tool. Oh, I didn't mean to deselect yet. And we're going to go ahead and put that arm back into place where we want it to be. Now, of course, we left our flames here, and that's perfectly okay because I'm just going to use my eraser tool to go ahead and erase those because we're going to go ahead and transform into a new torch here. So if we go back and grab the original torch color, which is right here, I can go ahead now and use my brush tool to go ahead and paint that torch back in. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a new flame here. Same thing with jump 1. We, of course, can go ahead and edit this flame here. And I want you to go ahead and do that. That's a little challenge I'm going to leave for you, is go ahead and edit the 2 flames in here. Go ahead and create your own. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and create your animation here. Just a simple 4-frame animation will work of these 2 jump animations. And then let's see how you did when we come back together. Alright, I hope you enjoyed your little bit of a challenge. And so let's go ahead and see how my animation turned out here. I, of course, have my 2 different jump animations here. I created a quick 4-frame animation. So when I go ahead and play that animation, you can now see I have this character jumping up and down. The flame, of course, reacts to his movement as well. So we have, of course, now our jumping animation. So we created 2 animations now. We have, of course, our simple kind of running animation. We have a jump animation as well. And the next thing we're going to do is kind of create more of an idle animation. So what happens when your character is maybe just hovering in place, for example.